Hi. So I'm sure we've all watched The Great Gatsby, but what really is Art Deco? One of America's most famous movements in architecture. So that's what I'm here to teach you about. So, what is Art Deco? Art Deco began in Paris in the 30s in an art gallery exhibit. The exhibit was toured around, and when it came to America, it blew up big. The movement was influenced a lot by Cubist and de Stijl movements, and you'll see that in the geometry and repetitive shapes. It was extremely expressive of the time period that it was in. So it was after World War I, between the time of before World War II. And in that period, obviously, everybody wanted to liven up their spirits, get back out, have fun, and you can really see that expressed through the decorative and flashy, somewhat like sexy decorations of the movement. So some key characteristics is symmetry, repetition, geometric shapes, and decorative features. Now, art isn't really like the first thing thought of when you think of Art Deco. You usually think of architecture or like product design, but I wanted to capture it because I think it's very important in a way that isn't talked about often. So Tom Purvis did these Austin Reed posters, and while it's not perfectly symmetrical, it's extremely geometric in the simple shapes that these two men are drawn in. I think it also shows the like the kind of flashiness of the time. He's wearing a suit. He has a little like champagne or martini glass or whatever. The man in the back has a very out there loud suit as well. And another thing that I don't think is thought of that often is how recognizable Art Deco typeface is. The pointed structures, the somewhat like odd placements sometimes of like bars, like in the R. It's not joined at the corner, but that's something very recognizable of the movement. So I wanted to highlight that. This piece of art is almost like, visually it looks like a 180. It looks more traditional in her painting style. But again, this helps like show off the money, the fashion, everything about Art Deco, what you think of. It literally has in the title that she's in a green Bugatti, a very fancy car. She has gloves, she has a big scarf, she has a hat, she has her pin-curled blonde hair and red lips. It really captures the style of the time, and I think it just, it screams Art Deco in its own way. So the first building we'll be looking at is the Chicago Tribune building. This building was constructed in 23 to 25, which you might be saying like, that's not Art Deco. Well, it was the first exposure to Art Deco. The building was a competition, and Howells and Hood won, and they took some influence from the Art Deco movement, but obviously, like, you're seeing a lot of neo-Gothic in the decorative features, all the jazz that's going on, but you're starting to see some of the repetitive movements in the windows, in the symmetry. So this was America's first exposure to the movement. The next building we'll be looking at is the Chrysler Building. My personal favorite. It is probably the most recognizable piece of Art Deco architecture. It screams it in those triangle windows. You can see the geometry of just squares and triangles. You can see the symmetry in the regular part of the building, how the mirror or windows are mirrored alongside of each other throughout the whole building. It's the same on each side. You can also see the symmetry in the triangles going up. They balance off of each other. There's also a decorative element to this, which I feel like isn't shown much on the outside of Art Deco architecture. Those tiles around the triangle have a somewhat reflective quality to them, and at night when they light up those triangles on the inside, they can change the color, and those tiles help the color glow and just give the building a beautiful little vibe to it. So this is the inside of the Chrysler building. This is their elevators, and you can see a lot more the decorative lavishness of the Art Deco movement, from the stone facade to the decorated doors to the inside of the elevator, and then you can even see a bit of the floor. It's very symmetrical, very obviously decorated, and I personally see a lot of influence from Art Nouveau in those patterns that the doors are creating. The last building we'll be looking at is the Empire State Building. This was constructed from 1930 to 31. It was the tallest building for almost 40 years until the Twin Towers were built in 1970. This is probably the most famous building in New York. It's sung about. It has been in, countless movies and TV shows. It is a huge tourist attraction. And I understand why it's so famous, but I personally prefer the Chrysler building. This one, to me, it's definitely symmetrical. Has that repetition. I don't think it highlights the decorative lavishness as much, but it's still a wonderful example of the movement. You can see some of that decoration, however, on the inside. This is their front lobby. It's their back wall. It's this huge mural of the building itself in gold. You can see the radial sun and all of the straight lines. Again, goes along with the symmetry and geometry of the movement. But this gold and that stone behind it, I feel just captures that flashy 1930s Art Deco. So, in conclusion, Mr. Gatsby himself, Art Deco has lasted the test of time and become one of the most recognizable movements, and it has left its lasting mark on American art, architecture, and culture. So, thank you very much for listening.